Chapman of the International Forecaster, and we're going to be talking about what's going on. And really, we are living in the most tumultuous times that I can ever remember. The whole world financial structure is collapsing. The head of the IMF recently came out just this last day or two and said Western Europe and Japan are in depression. Of course, Larry Summers, who, of course, is one of the Council on Foreign Relations, Bilderberger's group of 30 guys. Oh, so we're not in a depression. It depends on what you mean by depression. And, yeah, ladies and gentlemen, the whole world is collapsing. Suddenly, we lost 600,000 jobs last month. 533,000 the month before, and I think 560 the month before, and 533,000 was the figure that the Congressional Oversight Panel put out for the month of November. The whole financial world is collapsing, and they brought in a new team, which is exactly the same old team that created the problem. Suddenly, Timothy Geithner, the Secretary of the Treasury, worked with Paulson. He was the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York and one of the architects of the problem that we have today, and they have no intention of solving the problem. They're talking about, of course, they've got the other $350 billion left over from the TARP funds, and what are they going to do? Well, we've got to get the banks lending. Ladies and gentlemen, the reason that the smaller banks are not lending is because the Federal Reserve is paying interest and has sucked up over $500 billion of money that should be out there in the banks, and with a 10-to-1 or 9-to-1 ratio, that's $5 trillion of money that could be lent, but they don't want it lent, and they're not telling you, and nobody is telling you that the Federal Reserve is paying interest on the money they have. And then, of course, the large banks, they've got plenty of money. And with they can actually leverage 10, 20, 30, 40 to 1, but all they have to have is $100, and they could lend out, $4,000. But they can't let the American people know that. And what are the large banks doing? Well, they're all tied into the Trilateral Commission, Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan Stanley, Citigroup. There are only 87 people in the Trilateral Commission, this little group that are plotting the demise of our nation and merging us into the one world government. You can get their names at augustreview.org, and so they've got plenty of money, but they're not lending it intentionally and purposely to create this whole problem, to bring the world financial system down. And when you understand that, it all begins to make sense. At least it does to me. How about you, Bob?
It certainly does to me, too. And it's a tragedy that so many others who understand the problem refuse to elucidate on it on radio and television. I just think they're scared out of their wits.
Well, maybe fools rush in where angels fear to tread. But, if it weren't for you, you're the only person other than the Celent Report and Gary North who's written about the fact that the Fed started paying interest rates on the money that the reserves that deposited with it, and gave the banks an incentive not to lend. Well, we're told, my goodness, we're doing everything we can to get the banks lending. How can we get them lending? Let's just give them more and more money. They have done everything they could to discourage the banks from lending, but they can't let the American people know the truth. This whole thing is contrived, and millions of people are going to lose their homes and their jobs. There are going to be shattered lives not only here but throughout the world as part of this whole move to create an international crisis to bring in the New World Order, or as Henry Kissinger said, a chance for a New World Order. Bob, you go right ahead.
Well, you quite a bit there. I think one of the things that should be brought to the attention of the listeners is that just recently, I would say since probably September, the Fed has been forcing down interest rates. And there were rates on the one-year Treasury bills that were zero return. And in fact, at certain trading times, they were a negative return. But anyway, we'll use the 2-year, which was had a low yield of 0.70%, which is 0.7%, and that has moved up now to 1.03%. And the long bond, which is designated as a 10-year note, moved up from 216 to 303. Now, that was a very, very important exercise for the Fed to keep those rates down. And they have not been able to do that. And goodness knows how much money they spent keeping those rates down for 2 or 3 months. Anyway, the rates are up, and I don't think they're going to go down. And the reason for the lower rates was ostensibly to allow people who wanted to get mortgages to pay less. They wanted mortgage rates to get down to 4%. Mortgage rates right now are around 5.05. And we do have word from some of our subscribers that on 8 and 15-year paper, people were paying 4.35%. I got one today at 4.5% for a 20-year, and 4 5/8% for a 30-year. So that's pretty good rates. But by the looks of things, the Fed's going to have a heck of a time trying to hold the rates down so that the mortgages will stay inexpensive. They're doing that so people will refinance, bring their payments down, maybe have some extra money to spend in the economy. It's also for those who have to reset. It makes it easy to reset with a lower interest rate. And that is so that the 11.5-month inventory of houses can get moved.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back in just a moment. Well, this is Dr. Stan back here at Radio Liberty. Our guest is Bob Chapman, and of course he's with the International Forecaster. He's just saying that they're doing everything to drive the interest rates on homes down so that people will be able to buy homes, so that they can refinance their homes, so they'll be able to make the mortgage payments. Well, this would be a good and logical thing to do if you were really trying to solve the problem, and certainly I don't think that they are, but from this point of view, certainly they seem to be trying to address the problem of these mortgages. They're even talking now about trying to get to reassess the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac mortgages, that they insisted that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac buy these collateralized debt obligations, and trying to straighten those things out. In fact, even trying to take and put all these collateralized debt obligations, these faulty mortgage bonds, into some sort of a side bank and just hold them there, try to get people to invest in that bank. This seems to be one of the major issues that they're pushing now. And wouldn't that be a good thing? And then just lower the interest rate so people could afford to stay in their homes?
Well, hypothetically, yes. It's what they used starting in 1932 by the Hoover administration, and then they did it with the RTC again in the mid-1980s as the savings and loan business came unglued. And I don't know how much the first one cost from 32 to 35, but the second one cost, irrespective of government figures, $500 billion. And incidentally, we predicted that in our monthly newsletter to my clients in my stock brokerage business. And I don't think anybody else did at that time. I saw it plainly coming. But anyway, all you're doing is taking bad debt made by private interests and moving it into a fund which becomes the property of the American taxpayer. And they talk about this recapitalization of banks, and that's essentially what this is. And the toxic waste that are held by the banks would be transferred to government. The problem is, what are they going to pay? Now, in fact, I wrote about this today. I said this means U.S. taxpayers will be forced to be short puts. In other words, to cover the action. That's the taxpayer. Without garnering any premium to the insiders that can get a sweetheart deal. Any deal implies that the toxic assets will be sold much higher than market value, so the puts could be in the money quickly. And that means that the price that government would pay the banks would be higher than what it should be.